What should be just another ordinary day turned into a nightmare when, upon returning from his parents' house, a young woman came across a scene she would never imagine. The key did not rotate in the lock, and on the other side of the door, a family voice echoed with a tone that froze your blood. "Ready, honey, you can have fun. Your husband told you to come here anymore." The initial shock gave way to a cold and calculated determination. In a matter of minutes, everything changed forever. It was early on when Elena began to pack her things on a small suitcase. 3 days away from home to take care of his mother, who had undergone knee surgery and needed help more than ever. The 2-bedroom apartment on the 4th floor of a bland building was taken by the morning agitation. She would review the nécessaire for the 3rd time. She looked for the mobile charger and mentally listed the groceries she would need to buy along the way. Meanwhile, Vasily, her husband, remained stretched on the living room couch, rolling the news on his cell phone. 5 years of marriage had transformed the burning love of the beginning into uncomfortable silence, as if an invisible wall grew between them every day. "Didn't you forget that today I go to Mom's house?" Elena stopped at the door, watching her husband. Vasily lifted her eyes from her cell phone with an expression of who was interrupted in the midst of something extremely important. "Oh, yes, 3 days, didn't you? You had spoken. She's weak after the operation." Elena felt a strange boost of justifying herself, although she didn't know well for what to whom. Her father spent all day at work, and her mother could barely get to the bathroom alone. Vasily nodded with an air of forced understanding, but his eyes had already returned to the screen. Of course, it helps her there. Give a hug to Tatiana Nikolaevna for me, huh? That she gets better soon." The noise of dishes coming from the kitchen was unmistakable. Klavdia Egorovna, her mother-in-law, pretended to wash her dishes, but actually heard every word. Elena knew that sound well. It was her way to show without admitting that she was poking. Since Vasily took her to that apartment 6 years earlier, her mother had imposed her own rules. First, they were visits on weekends just for a tea. Then lunch delivered to the Tuesdays and Thursdays. Then help with cleaning once a week. And 2 years ago, after her husband's death, she moved temporarily to the guest's room, a temporary that, as everyone knew, would never end. "Vasya, don't forget to call me at least once in these 3 days," Elena tried to capture her gaze. "Of course I'll call. Every day," he replied without much conviction. The noise of the water in the kitchen ceased, and a few seconds later, Klavdia Egorovna appeared at the door, low, robust, with impeccably tidy brown hair and lips permanently frowned in an air of discontent. "Again going to your parents' house, huh?" His gaze traveled Elena from above, judged. "Last month, didn't you?" Last month was Mom's birthday. Elena forced her calm, although inside everything was contracted. And now she needs help after the operation. Of course, the mother-in-law squeezed her lips even more. "And who is going to cook for Vasenka? Who will get his things for work? Do you at least think about your husband?" A wave of revolt climbed the chest of Elena, but she controlled herself. That dance had lasted years and never took anywhere. Klavdia Egorovna, her falsely sweet voice, continued, "In my time, a wife who was valuing if she didn't leave home like that, he married, stay home, take care of her husband. But nowadays..." Vasily didn't seem not to hear, or pretended not to hear. It was easier like that. Elena had already understood that in the battles with her mother-in-law, she was always alone. Her husband never took sides. When you entered kitchen to pick up a water bottle, he heard Klavdia whisper to her son, "Again leaving. 3rd time in 2 months. Do you think this normal?" "Mom, her aunt had surgery," Vasily responded without enthusiasm. "Oh, it was? The last time it was birthday, before that it was needed to help the repair. I always got an excuse to escape you. When I took care of your father, did not come out even a day." Elena took a deep breath and decided to ignore. Soon it would be at the parents' house, where the air was light, without constant tensions or veiled criticism. As he said goodbye, Vasily finally got up from the couch. "Will it be a long time?" he asked, as if he had not followed anything about the conversation. 3 days, Vasya. I come back Sunday night, she repeated, patient. "Ah, okay. So give everyone a hug to me. And don't forget to call, she remembered. Of course, he nodded in a way that made it clear he wouldn't care. Klavdia didn't even bother to appear to say goodbye. He kept crashing pans in the kitchen, loud enough for Elena to hear. You'll see, Vasenka, one day she leaves and no longer comes back. I know women like her. Elena just shook her head and went to the elevator. 3 days away from that place seemed a salvation. The trip to his parents' house took almost an hour and a half, subway, bus and another 10 minutes walk. On the way, he stopped at the supermarket to buy fresh fruits, vegetables, yogurts, everything his mother needed to recover. His father even shopped, but no man knew what to buy for those who were sick. Upon arrival, he was received by the comforting smell of fresh tea and his mother's warm smile, sitting on the couch with his leg resting on a pillow. Ale. How good it is to see you, my daughter. Elena hugged her carefully, avoiding touching her bandaged knee, and felt the weight of the last days dissipate. There she was, just daughter. There, love was unconditional, without charges or caveats. How are you feeling? Elena sat next to her, watching her mother's pale face. It hurts, but it's better. The mother tried to smile, but the pain was still visible. The doctor said everything is fine, healing as it should. It just needs patience and rest. I help with the dressings. Elena got up. First I will save these purchases and start. And you? The mother held her hand. Vasily, how are you? Klavdia Egorovna. Elena hesitated. He never liked to worry parents with their problems. Everything normal, he forced a smile. Like always. Tatiana Nikolaevna watched her with love, but did not insist. I knew that when the daughter was ready, she would speak. Tatiana Nikolaevna sighed deep. He knew his daughter to believe in this forced normality. You know you can tell me everything, isn't it? He whispered, with a firmness that only mothers dominate. Whatever happened? Elena nodded, but was already rising toward the kitchen, her eyes burning with tears that refused to fall. 3 days. Only 3 days in that refuge where nobody's media with faulty looks, where no acidic voice commented on her steps, where she was not the incompetent wife, the disastrous daughter-in-law, the woman who never did anything right. At night, after helping her mother lie down and redo the dressings with careful hands, Elena tried to call Vasily. The phone rang until it fell into the mailbox. He tried again half an hour later. Nothing. You sent a message. How are you? Mom is better. Send memories. Call when you can. The blue visa appeared, but the answer did not come. The ajar door and the elongated shadow announced the presence of the father. Nikolai Stepanovich, tall and shoulders slightly bent by the weight of the years, waved the room with his kind eyes. Still awake. He sat on the edge of the armchair, his fingers drumming slightly on the wooden arm. How was the trip? Normal, Daddy. Elena kept her cell phone, as if she could hide with him the anxiety that and grew in the chest. Mom looks better than I expected. She's strong, agreed her father, rubbing her forehead with a tired gesture. Thanks for coming. Now, with this pace at work. It's hard to absent me. His eyes shone with gratitude that did not need words. And she is alone all day. Of course I came, Elena smiled, but it was a smile that didn't get to the eye. How not to come? The silence extended between them, dense as the morning fog. Nikolai Stepanovich studied her for a long time before asking, with caution that betrayed her concern, okay with you, Ale? You are tense. She shrugged, as if the question was a mild bolt to deserve attention. Only tired. The work, the house. Hesitated. Not everything is flowers, you know? Klavdia Egorovna. The father guessed with precision that made her shudder. A little, Elena tried to laugh, turning the confession into a joke, but the laughter came out bitter. It's normal, isn't it? All the daughters old go through that. Normal does not mean that it should be supported, said the father, the low but firm voice. Sometimes, my daughter, the problems are not solved alone. Sometimes you need to make a difficult decision. He kissed her on the forehead and left, leaving behind a simple truth and so terrifying. The next day was a rush of tasks, dressings, lunch, the meticulous cleansing of every corner of the house, as if Elena could, through the order of objects, impose some logic on the chaos she felt inside her. Once again, he tried to call Vasily. Once again, the silence on the other end of the line. The irritation, which was once a subtle tingling, now burned as acid. Was it so hard to get 5 minutes to serve your wife? On the night of the third day, as he arranged his suitcase to return, his mother entered the room. He walked more firmly, although the pain was still transparent in the cautious movements. "Here," said Tatiana Nikolaevna, extending a glass jam with raspberry jam, red and shiny as rubies. "For Vasily. Remember how he likes it." "Thank you, Mom." Elena wrapped the pot carefully, as if it was something fragile. "He will love it. It gives me memories to my son-in-law," the mother smiled, but there was a shadow in her eyes. "And Ale, if something is not well, you know you can always go home, isn't it?" "I know, Mom." He embraced it hard, the smell of lavender and homemade soap surrounding them. "But it's okay, I swear." I wasn't sure if I tried to convince the mother or herself. The goodbye was hot, filled with those little gestures that only families who love each other know. The father took her to the subway, and on the way they spoke of trivial things: time, work, the garden that Tatiana Nikolaevna planned to resume in spring. But when Elena got out of the car and waved farewell, her stomach's heavy sense came back. In the subway, he tried to call Vasily for the nth time. Nothing. He imagined the scene waiting for her, the sugar-armed mother-in-law, the poisonous comment right at the door. Finally the princess decided to go back, and Vasily's embarrassed silence, always so busy, always so far away. But what was waiting for her, in fact, was something that even her darker anxiety could predict. The time in the parents' house flowed differently. There she breathed without feeling the weight of judging looks, without the feeling that each movement of her was evaluated, measured, considered insufficient. On the morning of the second day, he prepared a light breakfast for his mother: oatmeal with honey, toast with cheese and herb tea. While Tatiana Nikolaevna ate in bed, Elena engaged in cleaning, wrapping the furniture with a dedication that bordered on despair. "You don't have to work so hard, daughter," her mother laughed, watching her clean the shelves of books. "You came to help, not turn around the home inside out." "I know." Elena looked around her parents' room, with her pastel and old furniture walls. But solids. "It's just that, it does me good. You know?" It didn't end the sentence, but the mother understood. It was not the first time he had noticed how his daughter cried in the presence of her mother-in-law, how her gaze lost her shine, as her shoulders tensed as ropes about to break. "Elena," Tatiana Nikolaevna held her hand, interrupting the mechanical movement of the cloth. "Have you tried to talk to real Vasily?" "I tried." Elena sat on the edge of the bed, her fingers pressing the edge of the blanket. "But it's like he didn't hear, or pretend not to understand. Your mother just wants the best, she's alone, need attention." "What? My need for attention? My comfort?" The mother's voice hardened, something rare in her. "No one speaks, doesn't it?" Elena laughed, a dry sound without joy. "Sometimes I feel that I'm not your wife, just an accessory. Useful when it suits, uncomfortable when not." The mother squeezed her hand with a surprising force. "Mir's is more, Ale. Much more." Elena's eyes burned, but she blinked fast, chasing her tears, and changed the subject in a hurry that denied her despair. "Let's make your dressing change. Then I have to prepare lunch before Dad arrive." "Hello, Aunt Galia. Here is Elena, from apartment 42. The voice came out trembling, as if the words weighed more than it should. Across the line, a loaded silence, followed by a theatrical sigh. "Ah, Alenochka." The neighbor dragged the syllables, as if chewing each one before releasing. "What a surprise. I thought you had gone from the map." Elena squeezed her fingers around her cell phone, her nails nailed the palm of her hand. "Aunt Galia, just wanted to know if Vaja is okay. He hasn't answered my calls for 2 days, and she swallowed hard. "I was worried." Another silence. This time, longer. Elena almost managed to hear the gears of her neighbor's mind spinning, calculating how much gossip could extract from those seconds. "Well." Galia lowered her voice, as if a state secret shared. "He's alive, if that's what you want to know. I saw him early today, leaving with Klavdia Egorovna. The two seemed very busy with something." The last word was pronounced with a tone that made it clear she knew more than she said. Elena's heart made a unzipped leap. Busy with what? Ah, my dear. Galia's voice got a falsely compassionate tone. You know what your mother-in-law is like. Always with your plans. But don't worry, he didn't seem sick. Only distracting. Like who has a lot in the head. A calculated pause. By the way, you won't believe what I saw here today in the building. Elena felt her stomach turn. She knew. He knew this was a bait, a poisoned hook that Galia shook in front of her, hoping she would bite. But curiosity or despair was stronger. What? Well. The neighbor sighed, as she was reluctant to share something so delicate. I saw a man exchanging the locks of your apartment. Yes, of yours, Alenochka. 42. I figured it was a problem with the administration, but now, she left the phrase in the air like a knife hanging by a thread. The words hit Elena like a punch. Locks. Changing. The room around her began to spin, the outlines of the furniture blurring. She heard her own breath, short and panting, as if running miles. Aunt Galia, are you sure? Of course I have. The neighbor's voice climbed a tone, offended by doubt. I saw with my own eyes. The man even showed me the order of service. Signed by your mother-in-law, just imagine. A dry giggle. But don't worry, honey. These things happen. Today's women. Well, you know how it is. We can't simply go away when you well understand and wait for everything to be like before, right? Elena didn't answer. I couldn't. Galia's words echoed in her head, mixing with the sound of her own blood. Throbbing in the ears. Locks. Klavdia Egorovna. Plans. Alenochka. The neighbor's voice sounded away, as if he came from the bottom of a well. Are you still there? I am. She forced the word out, mechanics. Thank you, Aunt Galia. I need to go. Wait. Galia tried to hold the call, but Elena had already turned off. The cell phone slipped from his fingers and fell on the couch. She looked at her own hand, as if they belonged to someone else. They locked it out. It was not a question. It was a cruel and irrefutable fact that settled in his chest like a tumor. Daughter. The mother's voice came from the bedroom door, worried. What happened? Elena looked up, and it was then that the tears, those she had been following with tooth and nail, finally overflowed. They were not tears of sadness. They were of anger. Of humiliation. Something much worse. The certainty that for the first time she was really alone. They took me from the house, Mom. Her voice broke, but not for weakness. For a fury so intense that it hurt. And now, I don't know if I still have nowhere to go. The mother's voice was still echoing in her ears, cool when she arrived, while Elena squeezed the bag of her bag against her chest, as if that pressure could contain the storm that grew inside her. The sharp wind dragged damp leaves down the sidewalk, gluing them to his shoes, and the smell of wet rain mingled with the bitterness of betrayal. She didn't need Aunt Galia's warning to know that something was wrong. 3 days of silence were enough response. But that. Change locks. The audacity was to leave no breath. Did they really think I would swallow it? He whispered to herself, her fingers shaking when entering the community participant number on the phone. It was not a call she wanted to make. It was a statement of war. The elevator climbed with a metallic creak, reflecting his state of mind, tense, about to break. Each floor approached her not a home, but a minefield, and she had no intention of retreating. When the doors opened, Elena took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the raspberry Vaja in her bag as an ironic symbol, the candy that should be a gesture of peace, now bound by reality. The door of the apartment was there, intact in appearance, but strange in his familiarity. She turned the key, or tried. The metal scraped against the new, cold and definitive lock. Click. No movement. No concession. Elena hit. Once. 2. Then with the strength of who knows that it will not be answered, but refuses to accept silence as an answer. Open this door, Vasily. His voice didn't train. Burned. Or I swear to God that you will regret making me wait outside. Inside the apartment, the hasty echo. The shadow of someone approaching the door but not to open it. To spy through the magical eye, like a coward. Alenochka, the voice of Klavdia Yegorovna was filtered through the crack, sweet as poison. What a surprise. You came back earlier than we expected. Open. A door. Each syllable was a knife. Ah, honey, you know how it is. The mother-in-law sighed, theatrical. Vasily and I were so concerned about his prolonged absence. We had to take measures. For safety, do you understand? Elena laughed. A short sound without humor. Safety against whom, Klavdia? Against the woman who spent 3 years paying the bills of this apartment while her son played a donzello man? She pressed her palm against the wood, as if she could push the door only with the strength of her fury. You have exactly 10 seconds to open, or I call the police and explain how property theft and kidnapping work. And believe me, he continued, lowering his voice to a tone that fell to the air, I have all the messages, all the calls ignored. All the evidence you have planned this. Silence. Then the sound of a current being removed. Not by volonté, but by calculation. The door opened just enough to reveal Vasily, pale like a ghost, the red eyes of sleepless nights. He didn't look at her. He looked back, where Klavdia Yegorovna remained in the shadow, her arms crossed, the satisfactory smile on her face as a victory signature. Elena. He started, his voice hoarse. No. She raised her hand, cutting it. You don't speak. You hear. And then, with a calm that terrified the mother-in-law, Elena pulled the phone from her pocket and held it at their eyes. The screen illuminated his face, highlighting the determination burning in his eyes. You have 2 options, let me come in now, or the next person who crosses this door is an officer with a mandate. And me. I will wait here. All the time it is necessary. She smiled without joy. Because, unlike you, I know what it is to fight for what is mine. The door opened with a dry crack, revealing Vasily's shitted face and, behind him, the furious shadow of Klavdia Igorovna. The smell of burnt garlic and damp fabric invaded the corridor, mixed with the cheap perfume that Elena had never used. Her eyes swept the entrance in seconds, the men's socks thrown over the entrance furniture, the unknown female coat in the hanger, the dirty shoe marks on the floor she had rubbed until shining the week before. Every detail was a knife stuck in the back. This is absurd, roared Klavdia, the trembling fingers pointing to the policeman. They are invading our house. Your home, Elena repeated, the sharp voice like blades. She advanced a step, forcing Vasily to retreat. Show me a single document with your name on this property. The silence that followed was enough response. The impassive participant flipped the papers with bureaucratic methodism. Here is, Apartment 42, Malinovsky Prospect, owned by Sajiva Alyona Nikolaevna, read aloud, as if each syllable were a hammer hitting the coffin of their lies. Own and registered. And you, he turned to Vasily, is registered with Komsomolskaya, 82, along with his mother. Klavdia swallowed hard, her hands charisma in the dirty fat apron bar. But he is my husband. Elena laughed, a dry sound, without humor. Or it was. She threw the ring on the floor, among them. The ring turned, shining in the yellow light of the chandelier before stopping at Vasily's feet. Husband doesn't lock her wife away from home. Husband does not let the mother-in-law dictate her life. Husband, she lowered her voice, every word a blow, does not choose her mother instead of the woman who swore to love. Vasily opened her mouth, but no excuse came out. Just a muffled moan, like that of a wounded animal. Illegal self-help protocol, the participant announced, pen by scratching the paper with surgical accuracy. Fine of 5,000 rubles for each, plus the obligation to restore immediate access to the owner. Klavdia Arfu, as if he had slapped her. 5,000. Because of this ungrateful? Ungrateful? Elena repeated, her fingers closing in fists. I worked bent to pay the bills while your son spent the nights on the couch. I cleaned her mother's vomiting when she drank too much in the new year. Me, her voice trembled for the first time, but she controlled herself. I forgave you, Vasily, when I found out she hid my sick mother's cards. She turned to the closet, pulled the document drawer and removed a blue folder. Here are the medical exams. Here, the transfer vouchers for her treatment. And here, she threw a pack of paper at Klavdia's feet, the messages you erased from his cell phone, where my mother asked for help. The blood shot Vasili's face. Alan. I didn't know. Of course. She closed the folder with a snap. Because you never wanted to know. Elena turned to the locksmith, who was already working in the professional lock. Change all the padlocks. Ho. J.E. Then for the policeman, I want a police report for violation of home and defamation. His gaze froze Klavdia. And if either one of the two stepping here again without my authorization, it will be over my lawyer. You can't do that. Klavdia advanced, but the participant lifted her hand. He can. And go. He closed the folder. I recommend that they leave now, before the situation gets worse. Vasily was still trying to formulate a sentence, her eyes damp when Elena picked up her suitcase and pushed the bedroom door with her shoulder. Skirt. It was not a request. It was an order, pronounced with the calm of those who had already buried all the illusions. Klavdia spat on the floor, her lips twisted in a growl. You'll regret it, your witch. Elena smiled. Not the tense smile of before, but something new, sharp, triumphant. I regretted it once. She pointed to the door. That's when I didn't kick you two of my life before. And when the door finally closed behind them, with the definitive sound of the new lock fitting in place, Elena touched her back in the wood, closed her eyes and took a deep breath. It was not relief. It was something more powerful, the first day of the rest of your life. 3 days without answering calls. It wasn't the mother, Vasily. Elena cut him off before he could continue, with a voice that left no room for excuses. No, Vasya. This is you. An adult man, not a 5-year-old boy. The responsibility for your actions is yours. Stop playing everything on mom's back. The bedroom door exploded with the entrance of Klavdia Yegorovna, furious as a storm in flesh and bone. What is this staging? Where do you think you are going? And your husband, her? My husband, Elena closed her suitcase with a dry crack, go where she is registered. How do you dare? The mother-in-law choked, offended, her trembling hands of indignation. Vasya, tell her. This is our apartment. Actually, it's not. The calm voice of the military police officer cut the air like a blade when appearing in the doorway. Legally, this is the residence of Elena Sergeyeva. If she asks you to leave, they are required to obey. Playing us on the street. Klavdia widened her eyes, performing the victim with mastery. It's 8 at night, said the policeman, impassive. And as I understand it, you have where to live. They will not be homeless. Vasily seemed lost, the look jumping between his wife and mother, not knowing which goddess to sacrifice her loyalty. Alan. He stepped forward, his voice broken. Let's talk. I explain everything. He explained. She threw the handle on her shoulder, cold eyes like steel. With every choice you made. I'm going to the lawyer. Tomorrow, entry with the divorce request. Divorce. The mother-in-law almost choked on her own saliva. Because of a silly fight, Vasya? Don't allow it. But Vasily remained motionless, his hands fallen by his body, the silence weighing like a sentence. For the first time in years, Elena saw something beyond usual indecision in his eyes, the overwhelming weight of understanding. Too late. She passed him toward the hallway, where the policeman was waiting. Are you sure you want to leave? Asked softly. By law, they should leave the place. I have. A firm nod. I don't want to stay here today. I spend the night with a friend. Tomorrow I decide the rest. As you like. He extended a copy of the protocol. Keep. It can be useful in the process. The sound Klavdia issued was a grotesque mixture of sob and protest. There is still time to fix. He begged, dramatic. Vasya, say you love her. But Vasily just looked at the floor, the words attached to her throat like thorns. I give you until tomorrow night. Elena went to him, ignoring her mother-in-law for the first time in her life. To get your things and go out. Leave the keys with Aunt Galia. And, like an ironic post-describe, a jelly jam took place from the bag. This is my mother. She was worried about you. Without me. The door closed behind her with a final click. The policeman accompanied her on the staircase, the yellow light of the lamps shaking on the peeled walls. "He is well?" he asked, when they reached the lobby. "I'll stay." The answer came out without hesitation. "Thanks for the help." Outside, the night had fallen, but the rain had ceased. Spring's fresh air filled his lungs, light as a promise. Yes, there was divorce ahead, the bureaucratic battles, the scars that still hurt. But for the first time in years, Elena was not afraid. It didn't look back. "I couldn't stand more humiliations dressed as family." He took off his cell phone and dialed the number of Roth, his friend from decades. "It is me." The voice didn't train. "Can I stay at your home today? I need help, and perhaps the contacts of a good lawyer." On the other end of the line, IRA did not hesitate. "Of course. And already warning, I know Mikhail Levchenko. Specialist in divorce and, among us, hot." "Roth." Elena rolled her eyes, despite the involuntary smile that came up. "I just decided to divorce myself." Just informing, the friend made an innocent sound. "Maybe fate has plans?" She laughed. For the first time on that endless day, the sound was genuine, free. Maybe it was right. Maybe all that was not an end, but a beginning. The beginning of a life without shackles, without judges, without the need to shrink to fit the dreams of others. Elena did not know yet that fate, in fact, was surprised in the form of lawyer Mikhail Levchenko. But this was a story for another chapter. The next morning she woke up with a strange lightness. The Roth couch, although not his bed, had given him the calmer night of sleep in years. Without the constant tension of listening to stealing steps in the corridor, without the weight of knowing that each breath of his was evaluated, criticized, measured. "How are you?" IRA slid a cup of coffee and a plate of toast toward him. Elena held her cup, feeling the heat spread through her hands. "I knew, anger." He started, his voice low, but firm. "They changed the lock. As if I were an intruder. A break. And the worst was not the lock. It was Vaja to let them do that. Stopped, watching as they kicked me out of my house. Because this is what he always did, nothing." Elena turned the distracted spoon on her coffee, her eyes lost at some point beyond the cup. "It's weird, anger." He murmured more to herself than for her friend. "I thought it was destroyed. To collapse. But I feel relief. As if a weight of years had been torn from my back." IRA let out a dry, almost triumphant laugh. "Of course you feel relief, my face. Getting rid of such a mother-in-law and a husband who has no spine is the best gift the universe could give you." A weak, almost imperceptible smile touched Elena's lips. But in the eyes, behind the newly discovered determination, still burned a twinge of pain. 5 years. 5 years of promises, four-handed plans of nights when she still believed that their forever meant something. All collapsed in a matter of hours, not for an accident, not for a cruel destination, but by Vaja's chronic cowardice. For her inability to choose her instead of the unhealthy comfort of being an eternal boy of mom. It was then that Mikhail's name came on his lips as a reflection. Roth wasted no time. "He can receive you today at 11 a.m., he announced, sliding a paper on the table with a handwritten address. "Here. And don't thank me," he added, squeezing Elena's hand before she could open her mouth. "You would do the same for me." "I don't know what would be me without you," Elena admitted, her voice slightly hoarsely. "It would survive." As he always did, IRA blinked, with a smile that was half a joke, half naked truth. "Only with me it's faster." Levchenko and partners occupying an entire floor of a glass and steel deo in the heart of the city, where the air smelled of money and irrevocable decisions. Elena felt her fingers tingling as the elevator climbed to the 7th floor, as if each floor approached not only to a lawyer, but from a version of herself that she didn't know yet, the one that acted instead of just enduring. The receptionist, a young woman with impeccable bun and trained smile, lifted her eyes as soon as she entered. "You must be Elena Sergeeva. Mikhail Andreevich is already waiting." The office was a mixture of minimalist elegance and discreet power, clear walls, straight-line furniture, a panoramic window that fits the city as a background of a future being rewritten. And behind the mahogany table, A tall man with dark hair and grey eyes that seemed able to read not only contracts but people. Mikhail Levchenko, he introduced himself, extending his hand. The squeeze was firm, the direct look, almost hypnotic in its frankness. I regret the circumstances, but I'm happy to meet her. Elena, she said, sitting in the armchair he indicated. The voice came out more stable than she expected. IRA gave me a summary, he tilted his head, as who organizes pieces of a puzzle. But I would like to hear your version. No filters. And then Elena said. About Vaja 6 years ago, the one who made her laugh to hurt her belly and swore she was his only safe port. On how, gradually, Klavdia Egorovna had infiltrated her life as a silent fungus, first just a visit, then until he sets out until the temporary became a permanent occupation, and his home, a battlefield. About the humiliations disguised as advice, the meals that were never good enough, the decisions that were made by her without anyone asking her permission. And of course, about the new lock. About the door that, for the first time, was closed to him in the face. Mikhail heard without interrupting, noting something here and there in a leather block. When she finished, she leaned over her chair and passed her fingers on her chin, as if every word weighing in the air. Legally, your position is solid, he said finally. The apartment is in your name, purchased before the wedding. This means it is very particular, non-community. Her husband is not even registered there as a permanent resident, and her mother-in-law, an ironic smile has touched her lips. You don't have to comment. It has no right on the property. So. Elena held her breath. Will the divorce be complicated? Given the circumstances and the occurrence report by Possessive Rubble? He shook his head. I doubt. But let's prepare for any eventuality. We will need the apartment documents, marriage certificate, proof of residence. I will write the initial petition today. That's when Elena's cell phone vibrated on the table, breaking the loaded silence. Vaja's name blinked on the screen. She looked at Mikhail hesitantly. You can answer, he nodded. It is even useful. Let's find out what their real intentions are. Elena inspired deeply and slid her finger on the screen. Hello. Alan. Vaja's voice sounded strange. Hoarse. Guilty. You. Where are you? It's not your business, she cut, dry. Leave the keys with Aunt Galia, as we agreed. Alan, please. There was a desperation in those dragged sounds. We need to talk. I know I was an idiot, but. He was. She laughed, a sound without joy. Vaja, you changed the lock of my house. He blocked me for 3 days while my mother was in the hospital. This is not being an idiot. This is cruelty. And the worst is that you don't even have the courage to take over alone. This was Mom's idea, he exploded, as if the words burned his tongue. You know how she is. No, Elena interrupted, each syllable a hammer. That was you, Vaja. You are an adult man, not the child. And their choices have consequences. I can fix everything. His voice broke. We come back as it was before. I promise. I'll rent an apartment for Mom, Goodbye, Vaja. She hung up before he could answer. The silence that followed was filled only by the sound of Mikhail's pen scratching paper, a deliberate gesture, as if he wanted to give her a second to replenish his breath. Sorry, Elena kept her cell phone, the warm cheeks. There is no reason, he looked up, and there was an understanding of them that made her shoulders. This is common. First, the denial. Then the attempt to blame someone. Then the empty promises. And then? She asked, because she needed to know. Mikhail sighed, as if carrying the weight of 1,000 equal cases. Then comes the bargain. Or the anger. He closed the folder on the table. But let's not anticipate. Let's focus on what we can control. The rest of the time was spent on legal details, on deadlines and strategies. Mikhail was not just a lawyer, it was a guide in Minined territory, explaining not only what to do, but how to survive emotionally to the process. When she finally closed the folder, Elena felt something rearrange inside her, not the pain disappearing, but the certainty that for the first time in years she was not alone on the front. I think it's enough for today, he said, pushing his glasses up his nose. I will prepare the documents until tomorrow. You bring what we combine. Thank you. She got up, and gratitude in her voice was not mere formality. I feel lighter. Don't thank you yet, he smiled, and the gesture turned his serious face into something almost welcoming. The work didn't even start. A pause. So, as if the idea had just occurred to him. By the way, have you lunch? Elena blinked, take it by surprise. I don't want to take your time. It's not taking, he said, already getting up. There is a decently good coffee here. And, he added, with a tone that left no room for refusal, some things are better discussed with a hot plate ahead. There was something in your gaze, a mixture of professionalism and interest. Not the invasive type, but that of someone who saw beyond the case, who saw the person behind the papers. Elena hesitated just a second before nodding. Of course. Soon. The coffee was 2 blocks away, a small, cozy place, where the smell of fresh bread mingled with the murmur of conversations. They sat at a table by the window, and as they enjoyed a light salad and homemade soup, the conversation slid from the case file to more personal land. How long has you been working with family law? Elena asked, playing with the fork. About 10 years, Mikhail replied, cutting a piece of bread. I started in corporate law. Money, contracts, mergers, a shrugging shrug. But I realized that what really mattered was the real stories. Where what is at stake is not just numbers, but lives. You must have seen every kind of family drama possible, she said dryly. And impossible, he laughed, and the sound was hot, unexpected. But your mother-in-law, I confess, is a case apart. Ah, Klavdia Egorovna, Elena sighed, and even that was lighter. The worst is that I tried, you know? She made the dishes she liked, asked for advice, swallowed each criticism, she shook her head. In the end, it was no use. For her, I was always intruded. Mikhail studied her for a moment, as if he measured his words. It wasn't about you, he said finally. It was about control. She didn't see a daughter-in-law. I saw a threat to the unhealthy dynamics he had with his son. Elena felt something loose inside her chest. It's sad to realize that just now. It's not too late, he contradicted, soft. The question is, what do you do with this perception now? She was about to respond when he tilted his head, as. And only then did you not even. Sorry for the indiscriminate. How old are you? 20-8, she answered, surprised by the question. And then, for the first time in a long time, Elena saw something beyond Mikhail's eyes. Something that could be curiosity, or maybe the beginning of something else. And then, as perceiving the weight of his own words, he smiled. A smile that was not just courtesy, but a kind of silent complicity. Lifetime is in front of him, he said, with a conviction that made up the surrounding air seems lighter. And believe me, in my experience, one day you'll thank you for this situation. She has made him stronger. There was a wisdom in that tone that did not sound like an empty cliché, but as a forged truth in years of observation. And for the first time in months, Elena felt something untie inside her, not the deaf pain of betrayal, not the anger burning like acid, but a strange, almost guilty relief. Because, yes, she felt heard. Not as a client, not like a wounded woman, but as someone whose story mattered. When he returned to the apartment that night, the corridor smelled of burnt dinner and cheap disinfectant. Aunt Galia, the door neighbor, emerged as a spectrum in fluffy slippers, extending a keys sauce and a crumpled paper. Forgive me, I'll fix everything, I love you, read Elena in crooked letters, while the neighbor shook her head with a mixture of pity and satisfaction. Your love's moved, my daughter. Klavka spit poison until the last minute, poor Vaja, it looked like a kicked dog. She sighed, as if the tragedy of others were a leaflet that could not lose a chapter. It is pity, see? Don't give it, Aunt Galia, Elena replied, closing her fingers around the keys with a firmness that surprised her. He made his choice. The apartment was strangely silent, as if the space itself breathed relieved. She toured the rooms with slow steps, cataloguing the traces of the hurried escape, the forgotten shaving blade on the bathroom shelf, the empty hangers in the cabinet, the hateful absence of the mother-in-law's porcelain vase, the one that Klavdia Egorovna insisted on putting on the nightstand, as a trophy of her invasive presence. But what struck her most was the smell. That sweet and breaded perfume, like rotten caramel, still hovering in the air, marking territory like an animal. Elena opened all the windows at once, letting the spring wind sweep the last features of that past. Then he exchanged the bedding with accurate movements, rubbed each surface with an almost ritual roll, washed the floors until the knees hurt. Each movement was an exorcism. Each drop of sweat, a purge. When the night fell, the apartment shone like a promise, clean, airy, smelling of lavender and new beginnings. Only then did she allow herself to stop. Hot bath, chamomile tea, the book that had been waiting for the bedside table for months. It was just diving on the first page when the phone vibrated. "IRA, what's up? How was it with Mikhail?" Elena smiled as she typed the answer, her fingers dancing on the screen as they wrote a confession. "All good. Vaja and the witch flew. Mikhail is great, by the way. Thank you for the indication. Tomorrow we started the papers." The answer was instantaneous, followed by an emoji flashing. "IRA, and Mikhail, as a man?" She rolled her eyes, imagining her friend's malicious grimace on the other side. Always the same, he thought, fun. Roth, I just decided to divorce yesterday. What meant that nothing? Roth, soon, I know you, Elena Sergeeva. This time, Elena laughed loudly, the sound echoing in the empty apartment. Perhaps it was going to be right. Mikhail had left an impression not just as a lawyer, but as someone who took up the space with a rare tranquility, who heard more than he spoke, whose eyes did not slide for her as if already had judged. But now she needed to close one door before thinking about opening another. Divorce, to everyone's surprise, was an almost antiseptic process. Vaja appeared to the audience with his falling shoulders, signing papers without arguing, as if the fight had been drained of him for a long time. Klavdia Egorovna, the great villain of history, didn't even appear. Maybe even she, in her sick pride, had understood that the battle was lost. 2 months later, Elena received the final judgment by mail. There was no party, there were no tears, just a long sigh, as if she could finally drop the air she had been holding for years. Life gradually began to rearrange. She threw herself at work, discovered yoga, let new friendships flourish in spaces previously occupied by grumbling and charges. And between a spreadsheet and a breath class, the face of Mikhail Levchenko began to appear in his thoughts with suspicious frequency. The first few times were accidental, a coffee to discuss bureaucratic details, a dinner to celebrate the end of the process. But soon the pretexts became unnecessary. Mikhail turned out to be a fascinating interlocutor, a man who knew how to silence at the right time and ask questions that made her rethink answers that she found ready. Unlike Vaja, who monologued about himself as if the world revolved around his frustrations, Mikhail listened. And there was something deeply erotic in that. Until, one night after an Italian dinner, while accompanying her to the door of the building, he stopped in the middle of the sidewalk and said, with a naturalness that left her breathless, "Elena, I know it hasn't been so long since your divorce, but I would like to see you more often. And not as your lawyer." She felt her face forget, but inside something expanded, hot and light. "I also like to spend time with you, Mikhail." He smiled, the way he made his eyes shine behind his glasses. "So how about we deal with you? And I invite you to the theater on Saturday." Yes came out before she could analyze him. And when the theater door closed behind them that night, Elena knew, it was not a new chapter. It was an entirely new book. The sadness he sometimes still visited was not for Vasily or the lost apartment, but for the way he had wasted his life, remaining under the suffocating wings of a tyrannical mother. Klavdia Yegorovna, according to common acquaintances, had become even more bitter and dissatisfied. He was incessantly complained of imaginary diseases, required the child exclusive attention and increasing amounts for medicines that never seemed enough. Vasily, in turn, obeyed in silence, denying himself to the essentials. Once, Aunt Galia, with whom Elena still kept sporadic contact, let go, shaking her head, "When I see you today, Alenochka, and I think about what was that man. It was not the divorce or the loss of the apartment that destroyed him." Elena could not disagree. No judge, no sentences would have been as cruel or as fair as the punishment that Vaja imposed on himself. That summer night, with the kids already sleeping and Mikhail preparing tea in the kitchen, Elena stood by the window, lost in the shine of the stars. Suddenly an intense heat went up his chest, gratitude. Not for the absence of pain, but for every scar that had led it there. He remembered the day he got home and could not enter the built-in locks, the door coldly closed on his face. At the time, it seemed the end. Today, I knew, it had been the beginning. Mikhail approached from behind, wrapping his shoulders with his arms. What are you thinking about? As life has strange ways to take us where we need to be. She spawned her, leaning against him. Sometimes what breaks us in the middle is precisely what saves us. He laughed softly, his lips brushing his temple. If it wasn't for that day, we would never have known each other. Maybe I should send flowers to Klavdia Yegorovna. Elena turned, laughing too, and kissed him before whispering. She would probably throw them in the trash. But their laughter was interrupted by the muffled cry from little Sophia's room. They exchanged an accomplice look and, holding hands, went to their daughter. These were moments like that, simple, almost imperceptible, who now weaved their days, the weight of a little body in their arms, the smell of fresh tea, the certainty that, on the other side of the corridor, there was someone who was waiting for them. That ancient apartment, where one day they denied her entrance, no longer hurt. It was dissolved as a fog in the sun, replaced by laughs in the park, movie nights at home and the murmur of mama at dawn. Because the largest falls are sometimes just the impulse needed to fly. Just have the courage to drop the floor.